would like to hear your story, and it's up to you, please. Can you see the slides? I think you'll have the slides up. Anand, you can start. You can give a brief introduction, and we'll just connect the slides.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rajan, and good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. It's wonderful to share this perspective with you. As Rajan knows, I'm a wireless guy. I came from many years of the wireless industry in a consulting fashion. But in that journey, I developed diabetes myself. And so I'm a type 2 diabetes patient, and it was one of those aha moments for me in the early days that inspired me, not only as a technologist, but also as a patient myself, that could there be a way that we could combine the two things together. Let me start off. You see the first slide in front of you. Let me give you a sense of where we're going. We'll probably speak for about 12 or 15 minutes, and then after that, I'll take some questions if you have any questions. But imagine for a moment a new drug. And imagine this drug is for the treatment of diabetes. And like all other new drugs in the market, it has to go through all the proper randomized control studies. It has to prove efficacious outcomes. It has to go through the hands of the regulatory agencies. So here in the United States, for example, the US FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And like all other drugs, it's prescribed by your doctor. It's prescribed by your doctor, and it's filled at a pharmacy near to you. You go pick it up at the pharmacy. And imagine though, if everything I just told you were true for a drug, but the drug itself were a software app, a mobile app. So literally software as a drug is really where we're headed, I think, in many ways, where mobile apps will become what they're now called in digital therapeutics. And I think that this space is really being governed, and it's being driven by four forces that you see here on this page. In the upper left, you see the healthcare reform. And we're shifting in all economies, in all countries, we're shifting from volume-based to value-based care. No longer is it important to just see your doctor. It's important to actually improve your blood pressure. It's important to improve your cholesterol, your blood glucose. And there's an increase if you would focus on quality and accountability. And in many ways, data informs that. And lastly, we have to take into account that consumerism, there's a very powerful force that the internet in many ways has democratized healthcare and access to healthcare. I mean, I'll just ask all of you a question. When's the last time you went to the doctor and you didn't check the internet first? Everybody does that, right? At the same time, in the bottom left corner, you see the chronic disease pandemic. And I'll use some diabetes statistics just to give you an idea of how bad it is. Here in the United States, we're lucky where it's only 9% of our population. In India, it's 14%. In China, 17%. In the Gulf Cooperation Council, which means, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, etc., the incidence of diabetes crosses 30%. And much of it is due to lifestyle. In fact, 80% of the newest cases of diagnosis are all due to obesity. At the same time, if you look at the bottom right corner, and you're a pharmaceutical company, today, in the developed economies, the average cost to develop a new drug exceeds $8 billion per drug. And yet, when you look at the persistence and compliance, or what we call medication adherence for those drugs, those adherence rates fall below 15 or 18% at the 6th or 12th refill. So if you're the pharma CEO, do you spend the one extra dollar you have to build a new drug, or do you spend that dollar to improve the medication adherence of what's already existing in the market? And then lastly, when you think about the upper right quadrant, of course, there is no faster growing technology than mobile technology. And mobile technology has no societal barriers. The richest of the rich has the phone, the poorest of the poor has phone. And the educated has the phone, the not so educated has the phone. And so here's a technology that crosses all socioeconomic boundaries. It fulfills the request that we all want in terms of both affordability and accessibility. Cell phones are both affordable and accessible. And so in many ways, our space is really being governed by these four factors. So if you go to the next slide shows what happens at the individual patient-doctor level. So fine, the previous slide talks about the macro forces. These are the micro forces. And you can just imagine the interaction between a patient and a doctor. A doctor wants their cholesterol patient or their blood pressure patient or diabetes patient, they want them to get their numbers under control. And there's a good reason for that. At the same time, patients may not be focused on those things. Patients may have a whole bunch of other issues. They may have lost their job recently. They may be having issues at home. And so the New England Journal of Medicine calls this physician-patient discordance. Doctor says X, patient hears Y. And so there's a if you would, there's a disconnect between what's happening at the day-to-day practice down at the clinical level. So on the next slide, that's what it feels like for a patient on a bad day. Sometimes I wake up in the morning feeling like that if I didn't sleep properly or if my glucose is wrong. That's how it feels on a day-to-day basis. And we ask, there has to be a better way to manage this. There just has to be. So on the next slide, you'll see there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of new drugs coming into the market. There's a lot of new medical devices. There's a lot of new things that people call innovative. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see an example of the number of drugs that have been introduced in diabetes alone in the last 3 decades. But just look at those percentages across the top, where it says 44, 44.1, 57, and then the number drops. And that's the number of people who meet the current guidelines for blood glucose control and for blood pressure control. That number hasn't gotten any better, despite all the billions of dollars we're spending on new drugs. And so we ask again, the current mechanism just doesn't seem to work. So if you go to the next slide, I ask a very simple question. Are we focusing on the wrong problem? I love the picture. In the picture, the vase stayed intact and the man's arms broke. So are we focused on solving the wrong problem? And if you go to the next slide, I would assert that there's only 2 problems we need to solve in all of chronic disease. The first problem is one of connectivity. Is the right data getting to the right person at the right place at the right time? But that problem has been solved in every other industry. It's been solved in entertainment, it's been solved in financial services. I mean, we all get our stock tip and stock quotes, if you would, on our phones. Why can't we get our chronic disease management solutions on our phones and notifications and messages as to what to do when we enter a parameter? But this is the easier of the 2 problems. The harder problem is the next slide, and that is the data is not being converted into information, knowledge, action, and outcomes. And this continuum of extracting value from data has to be done in a manner that's smart. And SMART stands for specific, so the data has to be specific. It has to be measurable, so it has to be something that I can actually measure and I can see a difference in outcomes. It has to be actionable. So telling a patient to lose weight doesn't fulfill the actual outcome. Giving them a pathway to lose weight, giving them a pathway to lower their A1C does. And of course, RT is real time. If we can actually engage patients in a manner that fits into their life when they need the feedback most, then we can actually make a difference. So if you go to the next slide, we ask, is there hope? And I think there is. I think in many ways, what's happening with the mobile revolution around the globe and the app revolution around the globe, and as you'll see soon, these apps are now being treated completely themselves as medical devices. So software as a medical device or software as a drug. And in many ways, this hope creates a basis of not just value creation for the healthcare system, but it also creates hope for the individual patients who are struggling with these diseases. So on the next slide, you'll see that really, I'm giving you a little bit of our own history and what we did, but we started this journey back in 2005 and 6. And keep in mind, in 2005, there was no smartphone. The word app didn't exist in the English language, right? It was the Nokia 6600 where you had to press the 3 keys 4 times to get the letter F. That was the technology we had back then. So there was no road ahead of us. We had to create the road. And Raja knows this. There are so many great entrepreneurs in this space around the world that we've had the pleasure of meeting at various conferences, whether they be in India or the Americas or in Europe or in South Africa. We've seen an amazing amount of people who are creating this road and paving a pathway forward for digital health and digital therapeutics to really take their place alongside medicine in the treatment of chronic diseases. So if you go to the next slide, what does a digital therapeutic solution look like? You'll see in many ways it's constructed of several pillars. For sure, it has to manage a patient's medications, right? For sure, it has to manage all their activity and their diet and their stress. It has to manage all of the environmental things around themselves. And of course, it has to measure and manage all the metabolic parameters. But it has to be done in a manner that provides, if you would, a fabric of clinical science and behavioral science and experiential science. At the end of the day, if these things aren't scientifically driven or they're not scientifically validated, then they just become gimmicks. And they become things that patients will use on average. As you know, if you take the top 1,000 apps today in the iTunes store for the Google Android market for health, they're used on average 18 days. That doesn't solve a person who's living with chronic condition for the rest of their life. They need these types of things need to be specific, measurable, actionable, and they need to deliver the real-time feedback to patients. So on the next slide, you'll see that one of the guiding principles in designing such solutions is we have to take into account security. And it's becoming even more important. Why? These digital solutions are now connecting both inwards and outwards. Let me explain what that means. When it connects inwards, these solutions connect towards the hospital data systems, electronic health records, electronic medical records, and we have to ensure persistency and security of that data as it relates to protected health information and laws that govern the protection of that information. At the same time, there's outward integration. Think about it today. Every patient wants to bring their Fitbit, their job, their Misfit, their iHealth, Apple Health Kit, Samsung Health Kit, and they're bringing all these attachments. They're bringing all these, what is called often as the Internet of Things. They're bringing other data sources that they tell them how they slept, or how much they ate, or how many steps, or what kind of activity, or how many calories they burned that day. And we have to ensure when we build these solutions that we build it with security in mind, because otherwise we're going to be creating a nightmare where we'll create a series of vulnerabilities. In fact, right now, here in the United States, the FDA and the National Institutes of Standards and Technologies has actually created a special task force to actually look at how we should deploy cybersecurity solutions for digital health. So on the next slide, you'll see that a critical success factor here is collaboration. And collaboration has to happen in multiple pathways. It has to be organized, but it has to be multifaceted. So the analogy here of the Houston 610 interchange, for anybody who's driven in Houston, it's a big array of roads, well structured. And in our vernacular, what that means is you have to involve public-private collaboration. You have to involve the governments. You have to involve the health ministries. You have to involve the pharmaceutical companies, the hospitals, the doctors, the patients, the wireless operators, the systems integrators. So there's a complex network of people that need to be brought together with a common set of requirements and a common set of objectives. That's how we then create, if you would, the fabric or the basis for a digital health solution. On the next page, you'll see that a critical success factor, this is the famous Dr. Collins, who's the director at the National Institutes of Health, NIH, in Washington, D.C., is the absence of evidence, the evidence of absence. In English, this says you have to have proven outcomes. You have to have studies that demonstrate that your solution actually generates outcomes. And outcomes have to be outcomes that are either clinically relevant, they have to drop an A1C, or a blood pressure, or a lipid number, or they also have to have econometric measure. It means they have to lower cost of providing aggregate healthcare to the patient. So it's important for these solutions to go through randomized control studies. In fact, on the next page, you'll see that when we ran our Blue Star Diabetes app through its studies, you can see that we achieved a significant A1C reduction to the tune of 2%. Now, keep in mind on the next page, when you compare that value to the top drugs in diabetes today, you can see that the average drug achieves about 0.9 drop, and seeing -2, we're getting twice the effect of a drug, but we're getting twice that effect of a drug just from soft growth, which is pretty dramatic. You can't swallow the phone. You can't substitute meds, but medications don't offer all of the things that a digital therapeutic does. It doesn't coach the patient. It doesn't provide insights to the doctor that can change the treatment plan. So we see this as a great augment. It's an augmentative or supplemental tool that can help, if you would, increase the efficacy of these medications. So on the next page, this is a cute slide I've found, which is we shouldn't be afraid of regulators. And here in the United States, a lot of people initially were afraid of going to the FDA saying, no, I don't want to go down that pathway. But many of you know who Bakul Patel is at the FDA, at CDRH. He's done a yeoman's job and a wonderful job in terms of bringing the FDA, really the 21st century, on this concept of digital health, and has taken this message globally. So I say this as an invitation to all of you. We should work with our regulators. We should work with the regulatory authorities to help make these solutions part of digital health, part of healthcare. We shouldn't be afraid of it. On the next page, you'll see that the next key success factor is how do you take these digital mobile solutions and how do you make them part of our policy? How do you make them such that these can ultimately be reimbursed? You'll see on the next page an interesting picture that shows a series of building blocks. In fact, I joke about this, but the disruptiveness of digital health is that there's no disruption at all. That means that the solution has to fit into healthcare as we know it today. I can't ask the doctor to do two different things. I can't ask them to treat their patient and then walk across the room, log into a computer, see what a digital solution tells them to do. It just won't work that way. It has to be integrated into their healthcare delivery. It has to be integrated into the healthcare flow. It has to be integrated into their healthcare data. So we have to keep the same building blocks we have today, and we have to combine them in innovative ways such that we don't feel the pressure of the disruption, but we experience the value of the disruption. So on the next slide, you'll see that today, here we are, BlueStar, it's actually listed up there on the American Diabetes Association website. Literally, it's the first mobile prescription therapy. It's the first software as a drug that's FDA regulated, and that actually has this criteria that it actually has to deliver outcomes, and it has to help people safely improve their health. I say this with great pride, because in many ways, this is the pathway that's now happening in the Americas. This is the pathway that's happening in Europe. This is the pathway that we want to see happen in China and in India and sub-Saharan Africa. We want to see mobile prescription or digital therapeutics take their place alongside, if you would, traditional healthcare. So on the next slide, you'll see that at the end of the day, and I apologize, this slide is meant to build, but the value proposition of digital health is, if you look at this picture, the bottom axis is the frequency of intervention. So how frequently does the patient intervene? And of course, the y-axis is the intensity. So you'll see surgery is up on the very top and left, right? It doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, it's a big deal. And of course, the common cold and flu and back pain, you can see back pain is chronic pain, it's down in the right. You just take a couple of Advils or Tylenols every day, but it's not a big deal. The problem with chronic disease is today they're stuck in that upper left quadrant. People don't engage as frequently as they need to, and because of that, they end up in the hospital. They end up with complications like heart attacks, kidney failure, blindness, amputations, and stroke. And so the real value proposition of digital health is it takes that bubble and it shifts it down to the lower right quadrant. So if you go to the next slide, my good friend in Mumbai, Dr. Kalpani, has a lovely book. If you haven't read it, I would strongly urge you to read it. But yes, information therapy does put patients first. And I think in many ways, this is a real example of where we can go in the future. And I think the last slide, which is the next slide, may show just a little comic that in many ways, Doctors will graduate from medical school tomorrow, not just with a stethoscope, they'll graduate with a mobile device, and apps will become part of the fabric of delivering quality healthcare. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to address you. I thank you for the opportunity to share some of these perspectives, and I'm looking forward to taking any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Anand. It's an interesting presentation. I think we all are very excited because you are the poster boy. You are a hope, in terms of how you deploy it, and you're successful in getting this actually to scale. And I know that you're also working in India. You told me last time. And I will now open the floor for questions if the people want to interact with you and they have something. Yeah.
Hi, Anand. This is Vibhav from GE Healthcare. Just a quick one. Being an Indian, do you plan to bring your digital therapeutics to India, and what challenges do you envisage?
It's a great question. The answer is yes. In fact, we were selected as one of a few number of parties by the World Bank to bring our Blue Star product to India. We'll be launching it in Delhi next month in May, and we'll be starting with a small pilot with Max Healthcare in Noida and 2 of their facilities. Now, the challenges in bringing a solution like this to India are multiple, but very easily managed. So the first challenge is the solution itself has to be customized and tailored for the clinical environment in India. So, for example, the drugs that are used are different, perhaps some more generic drugs. So the solution has to accommodate these differences, clinical differences. Secondly, there's cultural differences. So, for example, the food recommendations we provide here and the food recommendations we provide there may be different. And the food databases we have to use are different. So, for example, the India version of Blue Star allows the patient to enter their chole bhatura or their masala dosa. I'm giving you all bad examples of what a diabetes patient shouldn't eat. I should say chicken tikka masala because it's a little more healthy than at least it has some protein. But you know what I mean. These things have to be culturally adaptable. And then lastly, from a business model standpoint, these solutions have to be ones that fit into the economic strata that the constraints are within a country. So, for example, I can't bring the same US pricing model to India, which I won't. I have to price it like I would price it in India. But the beauty of these solutions is they're software. They're already high gross margin products, and so pricing really doesn't become an issue. You can offer these at a very, very low, affordable price that creates, if you would, this basis of accessibility for different people. So those are some of the challenges, but those are some of the opportunities we have to bring these types of solutions to India.
Thank you.